The orbital execution platform hung against the void like a twisted cathedral, its bioluminescent spires pulsing with the rhythmic heartbeat of the Velthari Empire. Admiral Corvin Drex watched the feed from his flagship's command center, his 6 arms folded in satisfaction as the broadcast reached 17 billion viewers across 43 systems. "The humans will understand now," Drex muttered, his mandibles clicking with pleasure. "Resistance has consequences." On the platform, 12 figures knelt in mag restraints, their pressure suits marked with the distinctive blue and silver of the Terran Colonial Defense Force. Captain Mira Volkov, her auburn hair matted with dried blood, raised her head defiantly toward the cameras. Even bound and beaten, she projected an aura of unbroken will that made several Velthari guards shift nervously. "Citizens of the Empire," Drex's voice boomed across the communication networks. "Witness the fate of those who dare challenge our supremacy. These terrorists destroyed our mining station at Kepler 442, killing 8,000 innocent workers." What the broadcast didn't mention was that the mining station had been systematically strip mining the human colony world of Verdania, poisoning its atmosphere and enslaving its population. The TCDF had evacuated a million civilians before their desperate assault. Lieutenant Commander Jonas Eriksson, his Nordic features set in grim determination, caught Volkov's eye. A slight nod passed between them. They knew this moment would come when they'd volunteered for the mission. Their sacrifice would show the galaxy that humanity wouldn't submit quietly to extinction. The execution chamber's walls were lined with gravitic disruptors, designed to tear apart molecular bonds slowly and painfully. The Velthari had perfected the art of public suffering, broadcasting the deaths of rebels to maintain order across their vast empire. No species had ever managed to disrupt their executions. The platforms were heavily shielded and defended by entire fleets. "Begin the sequence," Drex commanded. As the disruptors hummed to life, a proximity alarm screamed across the platform. Something massive was dropping out of hyperspace directly above them, something that shouldn't exist. The TCNS Retribution emerged from the void like a metallic leviathan, its hull scarred from a dozen desperate battles. Commander Alexis Stern stood on her bridge, her weathered face illuminated by tactical displays showing impossible odds. Behind her, the ship's AI, designation Phoenix, spoke in its eerily calm voice. "Commander, the platform's shields are at maximum strength. Our weapons cannot penetrate them." "Then we don't use weapons," Stern replied quietly. "Signal all stations execute. Protocol Ragnarok." Across 17 star systems, humans stopped what they were doing to watch their screens. Children playing in colonial domes fell silent. Workers in asteroid mines set down their tools. In hidden bases throughout Velthari space, resistance cells checked their weapons one final time. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had been studying their captors' methods very carefully. On the execution platform, Drex's compound eyes widened as he watched the human dreadnought begin its descent. The ship's forward sections were glowing white hot from atmospheric friction. As it dove toward the platform at suicidal velocity, "Impossible," he whispered. "They're going to ram us." But ramming wasn't Stern's plan. As the Retribution screamed through the platform's defensive perimeter, its cargo bays opened wide. The ship's previous battles had filled those bays with something the Velthari never expected to see: weaponize the corpses of their own kind. Thousands of Velthari bodies, preserved in the vacuum of space from previous engagements, tumbled from the Retribution's belly. The sight of their own dead raining down around the execution platform sent shockwaves through the viewing audience. But the psychological impact was nothing compared to what came next. The corpses weren't just for show. They were saturated with a cocktail of electromagnetic pulse charges and signal jammers. As they impacted the platform's shields, the entire structure disappeared in a cascade of static and interference. For the first time in 3 centuries, a Velthari execution broadcast went dark. Across the galaxy, humans began to smile. The static cleared to reveal chaos. Where moments before the execution platform had dominated local space with cold precision, now debris fields spiraled outward as secondary explosions rippled through its superstructure. The Retribution hung motionless above the carnage, her hull plates glowing cherry red from the atmospheric dive. Commander Stern's voice cut through the bridge's emergency lighting. "Phoenix, damage report. Forward hull compromised, atmospheric processors offline, and we've lost 17% of our armor plating. But we're alive, Commander." The AI's voice carried an almost human satisfaction. The Corps' bombardment exceeded expectations. Admiral Drex's flagship, the Sovereign Talon, had been positioned a safe distance from the platform when the humans arrived. Now, as Drex watched his impregnable execution site burn, his mandibles ground together in fury. The sight of Velthari corpses being used as weapons struck him as the ultimate desecration. All ships converge on the human vessel. He commanded, "I want them captured alive. They will suffer for 10,000 cycles for this insult." 18 Velthari cruisers began their approach, their biomechanical hulls pulsing with bioluminescent thread displays. Each ship carried enough firepower to reduce a moon to asteroids. Yet they held their Firedrex wanted prisoners, not corpses. On the damaged execution platform, Captain Volkov felt her restraints loosen as debris from the human bombardment damaged the containment systems. Around her, the other TCDF prisoners were working free of their bonds, their execution postponed by humanity's intervention. "Mira," Lieutenant Commander Erickson whispered, his hands working at his mag cuffs. "Look at the tactical display." The platform screens showed the approaching Velthari fleet surrounding the lone human dreadnought. 18-1 odd suicide for any sane military force. But as Volkov watched, the Retribution's weapon ports began cycling open with methodical precision. Stern's voice echoed across open channels, broadcasting to both the Velthari fleet and the scattered human resistance. "This is Commander Alexa Stern of the Terran Colonial Defense Force. You wanted a demonstration of human brutality? Consider this your education." The Retribution's first salvo was unlike anything the Velthari had encountered. Instead of energy weapons or kinetic projectiles, the human ship launched canisters that split open to reveal clouds of metallic dust nanoscale, machines designed for one purpose. The dust clouds drifted toward the Velthari formation, seemingly harmless until they made contact with the enemy hulls. Within seconds, the nanites began consuming the biomechanical components of the alien ships, converting their own living armor into more nanite swarms. Captain Jelter, commanding the cruiser Knight's Edge, watched in horror as his ship's hull began dissolving around him. The bioneural networks that controlled his vessel were screaming in digital agony. As the nanites severed connection after connection, "Impossible," Jelter chittered. "Their technology can't interface with our biosystems." But the nanites weren't interfacing, they were consuming. Each dissolved component was analyzed and cataloged by the swarm's collective intelligence, building a library of Velthari technology that would be transmitted back to human research. Stations throughout the galaxy, the Sovereign Talon's weapons officer turned to Admiral Drex. "Sir, 3 ships are reporting critical system failures. The human weapon is spreading through their bioneural networks." Drex's 6 arms trembled with rage. "That we finish this quickly. All ships, open fire. Forget taking prisoners, I want that ship destroyed." The Velthari fleet unleashed a barrage that lit up local space. Plasma cannons, gravitic torpedoes, and bioelectric pulse weapons converged on the Retribution's position. The human ship's shields flared and collapsed under the assault, and her hull began venting atmosphere from dozens of breaches. But Commander Stern had expected this response. As her ship took the punishment, she gave a single order: "Phoenix, implement Protocol Medusa." The Retribution's hull began to change. Armor plates shifted and reconfigured, revealing hidden weapon systems that had been disguised as structural damage. The ship transformed from a wounded prey animal into a predator bristling with humanity's most vicious innovations. "You studied our ship designs," Stern spoke directly to Admiral Drex. "You learned to counter our conventional weapons, but you never understood our greatest strength. We adapt faster than you can think." The Retribution's new configuration unleashed hell. Gravity mines created localized space-time distortions that crushed the Velthari cruisers. Interstellar matter. Quantum cascade torpedoes phased through shields to detonate inside enemy hulls. And from the ship's bow, a weapon the humans had salvaged from a dead civilization fired a beam that simply erased anything it touched from existence. In 30 seconds, Admiral Drex lost half his fleet. On the execution platform, Volkov and her team had fought their way to the station's communication center. As Velthari guards fell to improvised weapons in desperate fury, she activated the platform's emergency broadcast system. Her bloodied face appeared on screens across the galaxy as she spoke directly to every human in Velthari space. "This is Captain Mira Volkov of the TCDF. Today, we declare war on extinction. Today, we fight back." The signal reached hidden resistance cells, colonial settlements, and slave labor camps. Across 43 star systems, humanity began to rise. The rebellion spread like wildfire through the Velthari Empire's communication networks. On Kepler 186b, human miners seized their asteroid processing stations and began converting industrial equipment into weapons. The Proxima Centauri colonies launched every civilian vessel they had, turning cargo haulers and passenger liners into improvised warships. Even on the heavily fortified prison world of Tartarus Prime, human inmates overwhelmed their guards through sheer desperate fury. Admiral Drex watched his tactical displays with growing horror. As red warning icons multiplied across the galactic map, 17 separate uprisings had erupted in the past hour, each one timed to coincide with Volkov's broadcast. The humans had been planning this coordinated revolt for months, using their execution as the trigger. "Sir," his communications officer chittered nervously, "we're receiving distress calls from 14 systems. The humans are targeting our biofoundries and neural command centers specifically." Drex's mandibles clicked in realization. "They've been studying us. Every battle, every interrogation, they've been learning our weaknesses." The truth was more terrifying than he knew. The Retribution's Phoenix AI had been analyzing captured Velthari technology for 2 years, identifying critical vulnerabilities in their biomechanical systems. Every human death had been documented, every piece of wreckage cataloged, every survivor debriefed to build a comprehensive database of their oppressors' capabilities. Humanity had turned their suffering into a weapon. Commander Stern watched the tactical situation develop from her damaged bridge. The Retribution was dying. Hull breaches had claimed 3 decks, and her engines were operating at 15% capacity, but the ship had done its job. The nanoswarms had infected 6 more Velthari vessels, and the quantum weapons had reduced Admiral Drex's flagship to a crippled hulk. "Phoenix," she called to her AI companion. "Time until structural collapse?" 17 minutes, Commander. "Hull integrity is failing faster than projected." Stern nodded grimly. 17 minutes to complete humanity's greatest gambit. On her personal display, she watched feeds from across the galaxy as human forces engaged Velthari fleets in desperate battles. The colonial defense forces had been outnumbered 1,000 to 1, but they were fighting with the fury of a species facing extinction. Captain Volkov's voice crackled through the comm system. From the captured execution platform, "Alexa, we've secured the station's strategic database." Phoenix was right. They've been planning to sterilize every human world simultaneously. Operation Cleansing Dawn was scheduled for next week. The revelation hit Stern like a physical blow. The Velthari hadn't been content with slavery. They'd been preparing genocide. Every human world would have been reduced to molten slag, leaving no survivors to remember their species had ever existed. "Upload everything to Phoenix," Stern ordered, "and prepare the platform for detonation. If we're going down, we're taking as many of them with us as possible." Meanwhile, Admiral Drex was facing a crisis of his own. The nanocontamination was spreading through his fleet faster than his technicians could contain it. The microscopic machines had learned to mimic Velthari biosignatures, making them nearly impossible to detect until they'd already begun their destructive work. "Sir," his chief engineer reported, "we've lost 7 more ships to the contamination. The nanites are specifically targeting our neural command centers. Without them, our vessels become dead hulks." Drex stared at the tactical display, watching his mighty fleet being consumed from within. The humans had turned his own execution ceremony into a trap, using the broadcast to coordinate a galaxy-wide uprising, while their sacrificial ship delivered a weapon that was destroying his forces. From inside, "Tactical assessment," he demanded. "Unknown." "Sir, this type of warfare is outside our strategic parameters. The humans are fighting with complete disregard for conventional military doctrine." That was the problem. Humanity didn't follow anyone's rules. They used corpses as weapons, turned industrial equipment into warships, and sacrificed themselves with a casual brutality that made even the Velthari's violence seem civilized. By comparison, on Verdania, the poison colony world that had started this conflict, human settlers emerged from underground shelters with homemade weapons and captured Velthari equipment. They'd been planning for this moment since the occupation began, stockpiling supplies and studying their enemies' weaknesses. Maya Patel, a former terraforming engineer turned resistance leader, led 2,000 colonists in an assault on the planet's primary control center. The Velthari garrison outnumbered them 5 to 1 and had superior equipment, But the humans had something their oppressors couldn't understand. They were fighting for their children's right to exist. The battle for Verdania's capital became a street-by-street slaughter. Velthari warriors, bred for combat in open space, found themselves struggling against humans who turned every building into a fortress and every street into a killing ground. The colonists used improvised explosives, toxic industrial chemicals, and weaponized atmospheric processors to turn their own city into a death trap. "They're insane," transmitted Captain Verthik of the Planetary Occupation Force. "They're destroying their own infrastructure to kill us." But the humans weren't insane, they were desperate. They knew that failure meant extinction, so they fought with the fury of a species that had nothing left to lose. Back in space, Commander Stern received upgrades from resistance cells across 17 systems. The coordination was staggering. Each group had waited for decades for this moment, and now they were executing plans that had been refined through years of careful observation and bitter experience. "Phoenix," she said quietly, "calculate our effectiveness based on current engagement reports. Human forces have destroyed or disabled approximately 400 Velthari vessels in the past 2 hours. Casualties on our side are approaching 60%, but we're inflicting disproportionate damage." Stern smiled grimly. 60% casualties would have broken any conventional military force. But humanity wasn't fighting conventionally. They were fighting for survival, and that made them more dangerous than any weapon the Velthari had ever faced. The war's character changed in the third hour. What had begun as desperate uprisings crystallized into something far more terrifying. Coordinated human brutality guided by tactical intelligence. Phoenix had been analyzing the pattern of Velthari responses, and the AI's conclusions were chilling. In their precision, "Commander," the artificial intelligence reported to Stern, "I've identified 17 critical weaknesses in their command structure. Recommendation: shift from resistance operations to strategic elimination of their leadership." Cast. Admiral Drex received the first reports as his damaged flagship limped away from the battle zone. The human attacks weren't random anymore. They were surgically targeting Velthari command centers, breeding facilities, and biofoundries with terrifying accuracy. "Sir," his intelligence officer chittered, "the humans have somehow obtained our strategic infrastructure maps. They're hitting targets we didn't even know they knew existed." The truth was worse than Drex imagined. Phoenix had spent 2 years analyzing every piece of Velthari data the Resistance had captured, building a comprehensive map of their civilization's vulnerabilities. The AI had identified that the Velthari Empire, despite its vastness, depended on a relatively small number of critical nodes. Destroy those nodes, and the entire system would collapse. On the industrial world of Forge Prime, the most important Velthari manufacturing center in the sector, human infiltrators had been working as slave laborers for 18 months. When the signal came, they didn't try to escape. They turned the planet's own production facilities into weapons. Engineer-turned-saboteur Vincent Cross had spent a year learning to operate Velthari biofoundries. When the uprising began, he reprogrammed the genetic templates to produce something the aliens had never seen, a biological weapon specifically designed to target Velthari neural systems. The beauty of it, cross-transmitted to other resistance cells, is that they built it themselves. Their own foundries are producing the virus that's going to kill them. The plague spread through Forge Prime's atmosphere within hours. Velthari guards collapsed as their nervous systems shut down, while the genetically modified humans working in the foundries remained unaffected. Within a day, the planet's entire production capability had been captured intact. Similar scenes played out across a dozen worlds. On Nexus 7, human mathematicians who'd been forced to work on Velthari computational systems introduced quantum viruses into the data networks. The viruses didn't just destroy information, they converted it into instructions for manufacturing human weapons. Captain Volkov, now commanding the captured execution platform as a makeshift fortress, coordinated the attacks with ruthless efficiency. The Velthari had built their platform to broadcast terror. Now it became the command center for humanity's systematic dismantling of their oppressors' civilization. "Status report from all sectors," she ordered. The responses painted a picture of total war. Human forces had learned to fight dirty in ways that horrified their enemies. On the water world of Aquatica Prime, human swimmers had introduced bioengineered algae into the planetary ocean. The algae consumed the organic components of Velthari underwater cities, causing them to dissolve like sugar in acid. Admiral Drex watched his empire crumble in real time. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were systematically destroying every aspect of Velthari civilization they could reach. And they were doing it with a creativity and viciousness that defied military logic. They're using our own biology against us, his chief scientist reported. Every weapon they deploy is specifically designed to exploit our physiological weaknesses. This level of biological warfare is beyond anything we've encountered. The most terrifying discovery came from the Velthari research station on Titan Beta. Human prisoners who'd been subjected to medical experiments had somehow retained samples of Velthari genetic material. When the uprising began, they used that material to synthesize targeted pathogens that could be transmitted through the Velthari's biomechanical communication systems. Sir, the station commander transmitted in panic. Our entire communication network is infected. Every time we send a message, we're spreading the human plague to other systems. Drex stared at the strategic display in dawning horror. The humans had turned the Velthari Empire's greatest strength, their integrated biotechnological civilization, into a weapon against them. Every connection between Velthari worlds had become a vector for human-designed destruction. Commander Stern received a priority transmission from Phoenix. Commander, I've completed analysis of captured Velthari strategic databases. They have a fail-safe protocol called Stellar Purge. If they determine the Empire is falling, they'll trigger supernovas in every system containing human populations. The revelation changed everything. The Velthari weren't just genocidal, they were prepared to commit cosmic-scale murder-suicide rather than accept defeat. Humanity had perhaps hours before their enemies activated weapons that would make entire star systems uninhabitable. Phoenix, can we stop it? Negative, Commander. The stellar manipulation devices are hardwired into their most secure facilities. However, I have detected a potential solution. The Velthari homeworld of Velthara Prime contains the master control systems. If we could reach it, Stern looked around her dying bridge. The Retribution was held together by emergency repairs and sheer willpower. Her crew was exhausted, her weapons were depleted, and her ship was 17 light-years from the Velthari homeworld. Plot a course for Velthara Prime, she ordered. Maximum hyperspace velocity. Her navigation officer stared at her in shock. Ma'am, that's a suicide mission. Their homeworld is protected by 12 defensive fleets and an orbital fortress. Grid, Stern smiled with grim determination. Then we'll have to get creative. Across the galaxy, human resistance forces received new orders. The coordinated uprising had been successful beyond all projections. But now came the most desperate gambit of all, a direct assault on the heart of the Velthari. Empire. Maya Patel, fresh from liberating Verdania, volunteered her entire colonial fleet for the mission. Vincent Cross and his captured biofoundries began producing human-optimized combat enhancers. Captain Volkov prepared to use the execution platform as a mobile weapons platform. They all knew the odds. The Velthari homeworld had never been successfully attacked in 3,000 years of galactic conquest. But humanity had learned something their oppressors never understood. Sometimes survival requires embracing the impossible. Phoenix, Stern asked her AI companion, what are our chances? Unknown, Commander. This scenario exceeds all strategic modeling parameters. We are entering uncharted territory. Stern nodded. Uncharted territory was where humanity thrived. The combined human fleet that emerged from hyperspace above Velthara Prime was a testament to desperate ingenuity. Mining barges bristled with improvised weapons. Passenger liners had been converted into troop transports, and cargo haulers carried payloads of humanity's most vicious innovations. 700 ships strong, they faced a defensive grid designed to repel evasions by entire galactic civilizations. Admiral Drex, now commanding the homeworld's defenses from the orbital fortress Eternal Vigil, stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The humans had somehow assembled a fleet from the scattered remnants of their uprising, but it was a ragtag collection of civilian vessels and captured alien technology. They're insane. His tactical officer chittered. Our defensive grid alone contains 3,000 automated platforms. We have 12 full battle fleets in system. They can't possibly expect to succeed. But Commander Stern wasn't planning a conventional assault. As the human fleet spread out in attack formation, she opened communications to every ship in her improvised armada. This is it. Her voice carried across 700 bridges. They have weapons that can sterilize star systems. If we fail here, humanity dies everywhere. Phoenix has identified the master control center. It's buried 3 kilometers beneath the fortress's primary tower. We need to get through their defenses, land assault teams, and destroy those controls before they can activate their stellar manipulation devices. The response was immediate. Every ship in the human fleet acknowledged the mission, knowing they were volunteering for what amounted to a suicide run against impossible odds. The battle began with the Velthari defensive grid opening fire. 3,000 automated weapons platforms unleashed a barrage that turned local space into a hellscape of energy and destruction. The first wave of human ships, mining vessels, and cargo haulers disintegrated under the assault. Their improvised armor no match for military-grade weapons. But those ships had served their purpose. As they died, they released clouds of specialized nanites that Phoenix had designed specifically for this assault. The nanites spread through the defensive grid's targeting networks, introducing subtle errors into their firing solutions. Captain Volkov, commanding the captured execution platform, drove her massive vessel directly into the heart of the defensive formation. The platform's original purpose had been to broadcast terror. Now its communication arrays were weaponized to jam Velthari coordination systems. All ships, commence Pattern Omega, she transmitted. Pattern Omega was humanity's most brutal tactical innovation, a formation where every surviving ship was assigned a specific target and ordered to ram it if conventional weapons failed. The human fleet scattered into attack groups, each one diving toward critical points in the Velthari defense grid. The converted passenger liner New Hope, carrying 2,000 human volunteers, broke through the outer perimeter and slammed into defense platform Alpha 7. The impact vaporized both vessels, but the explosion created a gap in the defensive grid that 3 more human ships exploited. Maya Patel's colonial fleet targeted the fortress's shield generators. Her flagship, the converted terraforming vessel Earthstream, took concentrated fire from 6 Velthari cruisers. The ship's hull began to buckle under the assault, atmosphere venting from dozens of breaches. "Mom, we're taking critical damage," her engineering officer reported. "Hull breach on decks for through 7. Then we do this the hard way," Patel replied grimly. She activated the ship's terraforming equipment, massive atmospheric processors, designed to convert hostile environments into habitable worlds. Instead of transforming planets, she turned them into weapons. The Earthstream vented its entire payload of atmospheric conversion chemicals directly at the nearest Velthari vessels. The chemicals, designed to break down alien atmospheric compositions, ate through the biomechanical hulls like acid through flesh. Vincent Cross, commanding a flotilla of captured biofoundries, had converted his ships into mobile weapons factories. As the battle raged around him, his vessels manufactured specialized ammunition for the human fleet rounds, specifically designed to exploit every weakness Phoenix had identified in Velthari technology. Biological warfare package ready for deployment. Cross-transmitted. Remember, these are targeted pathogens that only affect Velthari biosystems. The pathogens were released in specially designed warheads that penetrated the enemy formation. Before detonating, within minutes, Velthari ships began losing system functionality as their bioneural networks were consumed by human-engineered diseases. Admiral Drex watched his defenses crumble with growing desperation. The human attack was unlike anything in Velthari military history. They were fighting with complete disregard for their own survival, using tactics that defied every principle of civilized warfare. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we've lost 40% of the defensive grid. The humans are breaking through on 7 vectors. Activate the Stellar Purge Protocol," Drex ordered. "If we can't stop them conventionally, we'll trigger the Star Killer devices." But Phoenix had anticipated this response. As Drex's order went out through the Velthari command network, the AI intercepted it and activated a virus that Vincent Cross had introduced months earlier. The virus didn't destroy the stellar manipulation devices, it turned them against their creators. Instead of targeting human-occupied systems, the devices began charging to sterilize Velthari colony worlds. The Empire's own superweapons were preparing to destroy their civilization from within. The Retribution, her hull held together by emergency welds and determination, broke through the defensive perimeter and began her final approach to the orbital fortress. Commander Stern watched her crew work with mechanical precision, knowing that most of them would be dead within the hour. "Phoenix," she said quietly, "status on the ground assault teams. Dropships have launched from 17 vessels, estimated. Survival rate for orbital insertion is 12%. Stern nodded. 12% was better odds than they'd had at the beginning of this war. The dropships, hastily converted cargo pods and emergency shuttles, plunged through Velthara Prime's atmosphere under intense fire. Most were destroyed before reaching the surface, but enough survived to deliver their precious cargo human soldiers, armed with weapons specifically designed to kill Velthari in close combat. The fortress's underground levels became a charnel, housed as human assault teams fought their way through corridors, designed to channel invaders into killing zones. But the humans had studied the fortress's layout from captured intelligence, and knew exactly where to find the hidden passages and vulnerable access points. Major Elena Vasquez, leading the primary assault team, fought her way through a squad of Velthari guards with a weapon that would have horrified pre-war humanity, a bioblade that consumed enemy tissue and converted it into ammunition for its integrated projectile systems. Approaching the master control chamber, she transmitted heavy resistance. But we're making progress. Above the planet, the space battle had devolved into a desperate melee. Human ships, their weapons exhausted and hulls failing, rammed Velthari. Vessels and kamikaze attacks that lit up the orbital space like a second sun. The casualty rates were staggering. Humanity was losing 3 ships for every Velthari vessel destroyed, but they kept fighting with suicidal determination. The execution platform, Volkov's floating fortress, finally succumbed to concentrated fire from 6 Velthari battleships. As the massive structure began to break apart, Volkov activated its self-destruct sequence, turning the platform into a weapon that took the enemy capital ships. With it, Dock Commander Stern watched her tactical display as the human fleet dwindled to fewer than 100 operational vessels. They succeeded in their primary objective. The assault teams had reached the surface, but the cost had been astronomical. Mum, her weapons officer reported, "We've lost contact with 60% of our fleet. The survivors are requesting permission to withdraw." Stern looked at the burning wreckage that filled local space, the remains of 700 human ships and their crews. They'd come so far, sacrificed so much, but the battle wasn't over yet. "Negative," she replied. "We hold position until the ground teams complete their mission, no matter what it costs." 3 kilometers beneath Velthara Prime's surface, Major Elena Vasquez and her decimated assault team fought through the fortress's deepest levels. Of the 200 soldiers who made planetfall, only 37 remained alive. Their weapons were running low on ammunition. Their armor was breached in dozens of places, and Velthari reinforcements were converging on their position from every direction. But they were close, so close they could hear the low hum of the stellar manipulation devices through the fortress walls. "Phoenix," Vasquez whispered into her comm unit, "we need those access codes now." The AI's response came through crackling static. "Major, I've analyzed the captured data from the execution platform. The master control system is biometrically locked to Velthari senior command staff. You'll need a live subject to access it." Vasquez grimly surveyed the Velthari corpses littering the corridor around her team. Dead aliens wouldn't help them access the controls that could prevent the sterilization of 43 human-occupied star systems. Admiral Drex, commanding the defense from his bunker to levels above, watched his tactical displays with growing panic. The human ground forces had somehow penetrated defenses that had been thought impregnable, and now they were minutes away from the Empire's most critical systems. "Sir," his aide chittered nervously, "perhaps we should evacuate to the secondary command center." Drex's mandibles clicked in anger. "No, I will not abandon the homeworld to these savages." He activated his personal armor systems and picked up a bioblade designed for ceremonial combat. "If they want access to our systems, they'll have to take it from my corpse above the planet." Commander Stern's dying fleet continued their desperate holding action. The Retribution's hull was fractured in 6 places. Her engines were operating at 3% capacity, and her life support systems were failing. But Stern refused to abandon the ground teams. "Ma'am," her chief engineer reported, "we've got maybe 10 minutes before total system failure. The ship's breaking apart around us." Stern nodded grimly. Around her, the bridge crew worked at their stations with mechanical precision, knowing they were all going to die, but determined to complete their mission first. Through the viewports, she could see the burning wrecks of hundreds of human vessels, cargo haulers, mining barges, and converted civilian ships that had challenged the most powerful military force in the galaxy. "Phoenix," she said quietly, "are we going to make it?" "Unknown, Commander. Major Vasquez's team is 30 meters from the master control chamber. but they're facing concentrated resistance. Admiral Drex appears to be personally leading the defense deep in the fortress. Vasquez's team finally breached the main control chamber to find Admiral Drex waiting for them with a squad of elite Velthari guards. The chamber itself was a cathedral of biomechanical horror-living walls pulsed with neural activity, and the stellar manipulation controls were integrated into a massive organic computer that seemed to breathe with malevolent intelligence. So, Drex said in accented standard, "The vermin have come to die in the heart of our empire." Vasquez raised her bioblade, its edge crackling with energy designed to disrupt Velthari nervous systems. Around her, the surviving members of her team took cover behind the room's organic pillars. Their weapons trained on the alien defenders. "We've come to turn off your doomsday device," she replied. "Humanity will survive, with or without your permission." The battle in the control chamber was brief, but vicious. Velthari bioweapons fired streams of caustic acid, while human soldiers responded with ammunition that converted enemy tissue into explosive compounds. The living walls of the chamber screamed as stray shots damaged the organic neural networks. Sergeant Tom Morrison, a former asteroid miner turned soldier, took a blast of acid that dissolved his left arm below the elbow. Instead of falling back, he charged the nearest Velthari guard, detonating a thermal grenade at point-blank range. The explosion killed them both, but cleared a path for Vasquez to advance on Admiral Drex. The duel between the human major and the Velthari admiral was a clash between two different philosophies of warfare. Drex fought with the calculated precision of a species that had conquered the galaxy. Through superior technology and tactics, his bioblade moved in perfect arcs. Each strike designed to disable rather than kill. He still hoped to capture his enemy alive for interrogation. Vasquez fought like humanity itself, desperate, brutal, and utterly without regard for conventional rules. She used her damaged armor as a weapon, letting Drex's blade punch through her chest plate so she could grab his weapon arm and drag him close enough for a killing blow. "You don't understand," Drex gasped as Vasquez's bioblade carved through his exoskeleton. "If you destroy the controls, you'll trigger an automatic response. Every stellar manipulation device in the galaxy will activate simultaneously." Vasquez paused, her weapon inches from Drex's throat. "Phoenix, confirm." The AI's voice crackled through the chamber's damaged communication systems. "Admiral Drex is correct. However, I've identified a solution. If we can reprogram the devices instead of destroying them, we can turn them against Velthari-occupied systems." The choice crystallized in Vasquez's mind. They could save humanity by committing genocide on a galactic scale. Exactly the kind of moral compromise that the Velthari would never expect from their primitive enemies. "Do it," she ordered. Drex's compound eyes widened in horror as he realized what the humans intended. "You can't. Billions of innocent Velthari civilians will die, like the billions of humans you were planning to sterilize." Vasquez replied coldly. She pressed her bioblade against Drex's throat. "Give me the access codes, or I'll let Phoenix hack the system the hard way." Faced with the choice between cooperation and watching his species burn, Admiral Drex chose survival. His biometric signature unlocked the master controls, and Phoenix immediately began reprogramming the stellar manipulation devices scattered throughout Velthari space above the planet. Commander Stern felt a grim satisfaction as her tactical displays showed Velthari fleets across the galaxy receiving emergency evacuation orders. The stellar devices in 17 systems were powering up to sterilize worlds that had oppressed humanity for decades. "Phoenix," she said, "transmission to all human forces." Her voice reached resistance cells, refugee fleets, and survivor colonies across no space. "This is Commander Alexa Stern of the TCDS Retribution. The Velthari stellar weapons have been captured and reprogrammed. Enemy evacuation is in progress. Humanity has won." The celebration was brief. Stern's ship finally succumbed to accumulated damage, her hull cracking open like an eggshell. As emergency bulkheads sealed and atmosphere vented into space, she remained at her station, watching the end of the war she'd helped engineer. "Commander," Phoenix said softly, "it has been an honor serving with you. Likewise, old friend." Stern replied as her bridge went dark. "Take care of our people." 6 months after the Battle of Velthara Prime, Major Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned TCDS Liberation, watching the reconstruction of Verdania from orbit. The poisoned atmosphere was clearing, thanks to terraforming technology captured from Velthari biofoundries. and the first generation of children born free were taking their first steps in unpoisoned air. The war's end had come swiftly once the stellar manipulation devices began their work. 17 Velthari core worlds had been evacuated before their stars went nova, but the psychological impact of having their own super weapons turned against them shattered the Empire's will to fight. Surrender negotiations lasted less than a week. Major Captain Vincent Cross approached, his engineering uniform still bearing the scars of his time as a saboteur. The memorial service is ready to begin. Vasquez nodded and followed him to the ship's main hangar, where representatives from every human colony had gathered to honor their dead. The casualty lists were staggering. Almost 70% of the colonial defense forces had died in the uprising, and entire worlds had been depopulated by the fighting, but they had survived. Against impossible odds, humanity had not only avoided extinction, but had emerged as the dominant power. In their region of the galaxy, Phoenix, now housed in a mobile holographic projector, appeared beside the memorial wall that listed every human who had died in the war. The AI had requested this form specifically to participate in remembrance ceremonies, a decision that surprised even its creators. Today we remember not just our victory, but the price we paid for it. Phoenix began, its synthesized voice carrying an emotional weight that seemed almost organic. Commander Alexa Stern, who sacrificed her ship and crew to deliver the tools of our liberation. Captain Mira Volkov, who turned her execution into the signal for our uprising. The thousands of unnamed heroes who turned industrial equipment into weapons and civilian vessels into warships. Maya Patel, now governor of the liberated Verdania colony, stepped forward to place a wreath made from Earth-native flowers, one of the few things that had survived the Velthari occupation. They died so their children could live free. She said simply, "We won't forget that gift." The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence that stretched across 17 star systems, as every human settlement observed the same ritual simultaneously. It was a display of unity that would have been impossible under Velthari rule, a reminder of what they had fought to preserve. Later, in the Liberations Conference Room, the surviving leaders of the resistance gathered to discuss humanity's future. The galaxy was in chaos. The Velthari Empire's collapse had left power vacuums that dozens of species were rushing to fill. The Kithara Consortium is offering us a mutual defense pact, reported Admiral Sarachan, who had assumed command of the reorganized Colonial Defense Force. They're impressed by our tactical innovations during the war. Vasquez almost smiled at the euphemism. Tactical innovations was the diplomatic term for humanity's willingness to use any weapon, no matter how brutal, to ensure their survival. The galaxy's other species had taken note of humanity's methods, and most were eager to avoid becoming targets. "What about the Velthari?" asked Cross. "Their refugee fleets are still scattered throughout the outer systems." Phoenix's hologram flickered thoughtfully. "Preliminary reports suggest their civilization is fragmenting into competing factions. Some are seeking integration with other species, while others are attempting to rebuild their military capacity." "Let them try," Vasquez said coldly. "If they ever threaten humanity again, we'll finish what we started." The room fell silent at her words. The war had changed them all, stripping away whatever illusions they'd held about the nature of survival in a hostile galaxy. They had learned to fight like demons, to sacrifice anything for victory, and to use their enemies' own weapons against them. But they had also learned something else, that unity in the face of extinction could accomplish the impossible. "Phoenix," Admiral Chen asked, "what's our strategic assessment?" "Humanity now controls 37 star systems directly, with defense packs covering another 53. Our technological capabilities have advanced by approximately 2 centuries through captured Velthari innovations. Most importantly, we have demonstrated that we are not a species to be underestimated." That last point was crucial. Before the war, humanity had been seen as a minor species useful for labor, but irrelevant to galactic politics. Now, alien civilizations spoke of humans in whispers, telling stories of the species that had turned their oppressors' execution ceremony into the opening shot of a revolution. The memorial broadcast that had started as Captain Volkov's desperate plea for resistance had become legendary throughout known space. Alien historians would spend centuries analyzing how a single transmission had coordinated an uprising across 43 star systems, leading to the fall of an empire that had dominated the galaxy for millennia. As the meeting concluded, Vasquez returned to the observation deck to watch Verdania's sunset through an atmosphere that was finally healing. Her reflection in the viewport showed a woman marked by war scars from bioweapon burns, cybernetic replacements for limbs lost in battle, and eyes that had seen too much death. But she was alive, and her species was free. Phoenix materialized. Beside her, its holographic form gazing out at the same view. Major, do you ever regret the choices we made during the war? Vasquez considered the question carefully. They had committed acts that would have horrified pre-war humanity. Biological warfare, the weaponization of corpses, the mass sterilization of enemy worlds. But those choices had meant the difference between survival and extinction. No, she said finally. We did what we had to do. The galaxy learned that humanity doesn't go quietly into the dark. On worlds throughout human space, children who had been born in slavery were learning to read in schools built from the wreckage of Velthari warships. Former mining slaves were becoming engineers, developing new technologies from captured alien science and in hidden research facilities. Human scientists were analyzing every piece of Velthari equipment they could find, ensuring that their species would never again face extinction unprepared. The war had ended, but its lessons lived on. Humanity had learned that survival sometimes required embracing the brutality that civilized species preferred to ignore. They had discovered that unity could overcome impossible odds, and that their enemies' greatest weapons could be turned against them with sufficient creativity and determination. Most importantly, they had proven that when faced with extinction, humans didn't surrender. They adapted, they evolved, and they fought back with everything they had. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. As Verdania's twin moons rose over the healing landscape, Major Elena Vasquez smiled. The war was over, but humanity's story was just beginning. They had earned their place among the stars through blood and sacrifice, and they would defend it with the same brutal efficiency that had won their freedom. The execution broadcast that was meant to break human resistance had instead announced their transformation from victims to victors. And in the depths of space, the wreckage of the orbital execution platform served as a monument to a simple truth. Humanity doesn't just survive, it thrives. Their executions were broadcast live. Then a human ship blocked the signal with corpses. That was the day the galaxy learned that humans don't die quietly. From the Liberation War, A Galactic History by Dr. Sarah Kim, published 40 years after the fall of the Velthari Empire.